The small-town diner buzzed with the usual late-night crowd truckers, locals, and a few loud strangers who thought they owned the place. The air smelled of coffee and fried bacon, but tension simmered beneath the surface. At the corner booth sat a quiet girl named Emily, wearing a worn leather jacket that looked a size too big. She kept her head down, just trying to finish her meal in peace. What no one knew was that jacket once belonged to her brother, one of the most respected members of the Hells Angels. The trouble started when a group of rowdy men swaggered in, loud and careless, their voices cutting through the chatter. They noticed Emily sitting alone and decided to bother her. She tried to ignore them, but one of them pushed it too far, grabbing her sleeve and mocking her jacket. The laughter that followed echoed across the diner, but it quickly died when the cook, a big man with tattooed arms, stepped out from behind the counter, his eyes burning with recognition. Because that patch on Emily's jacket wasn't just decoration, it was a warning. Outside, the low rumble of motorcycles began to grow louder, a sound that made every diner window shake. Emily looked up for the first time, a calm but knowing look in her eyes. The men froze as the headlights appeared through the misty glass. The door swung open, and the night air carried a familiar sound: leather engine and vengeance closing in. The sound of engines outside grew heavier, the steady thunder rolling through the quiet street. Inside the diner, everyone could feel it, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Emily sat still, her fingers wrapped tightly around her coffee cup, eyes fixed on the door. The men who had mocked her exchanged uneasy looks. Whatever courage they had was fading fast. The cook, named Ray, finally spoke, his voice calm but sharp. "You boys just made a mistake. You can't laugh your way out of." The biggest of the men tried to shrug it off, forcing a grin, but sweat had already begun to form on his neck. He turned toward Emily, as if searching for a hint of reassurance, but she didn't move or speak. Through the diner's glass, the red glow of taillights flickered. A few locals whispered among themselves, recognizing the insignia on the approaching bikes. The Hells Angels weren't from this town, but everyone knew stories about loyalty, about how they protected their own. And now, it seemed, one of their own was sitting right here. Emily's thoughts drifted back to her brother. Jackie had always told her, "If trouble ever finds you, don't run. We'll come." She never really believed he meant it literally. Until now. The engine stopped, and the night went completely still. The door handle rattled. Every heartbeat in the diner seemed to pause. Then, a deep voice called from outside, calm but commanding, asking for the girl in the leather jacket. Emily's hands trembled slightly, though she forced herself to stay composed. She could hear the low hum of leather jackets brushing together, the faint clink of chains, and the unmistakable weight of power in the air. The men who had taunted her tried to laugh again, but it sounded hollow, like they were forcing life back into a dead joke. Ray moved closer, subtly blocking the aisle, his eyes scanning the windows as if reading the tension in the night. Outside, a group of bikers stood tall, their helmets tucked under arms, patches glinting under the dim streetlights. Each face carried a mix of seriousness and warning. One of them, older and scarred, stepped forward, locking eyes with Emily. His gaze was both protective and threatening. Emily felt a strange surge of calm. She knew these were not ordinary people coming to her defense, they were her family. Inside the diner, whispers began to circulate among the patrons. Some had seen bikers before, but never a situation like this. The men who had caused trouble fidgeted nervously, sensing that this confrontation was far bigger than they had imagined. One tried to slip out the back, but Ray's steady hand on his shoulder stopped him. Emily's mind flashed to the past, the times she had watched her brother ride into town, how people had feared and respected him. She remembered the unspoken code, the loyalty and danger intertwined in every action. And now, that same code seemed to hover over her, alive and tangible, shaping the next moment. The older biker spoke again, his voice carrying over the quiet street. "We need a word with you," he said, nodding toward Emily. The men at the diner froze, unsure if they were being warned or sentenced. Emily met her brother's lieutenant's eyes, and felt the weight of the storm about to hit. The tension in the diner was almost unbearable. Every eye was on Emily, who stood slowly, her leather jacket tightening around her shoulders like armor. Outside, the bikers moved as one, their presence a living warning. The men who had harassed her stumbled backward, realizing too late that they were out of their depth. One of them swallowed hard, glancing at the door as if hoping the night would swallow him whole. Ray's hand lingered near the counter, ready to intervene. But even he knew this wasn't his fight. It was bigger than anything the diner had ever seen. Emily's mind raced. She could hear the faint roar of engines, smell the leather and gasoline, and feel the weight of countless eyes on her. Her pulse pounded, yet a strange calm steadied her. She had always known her brother and his crew lived by a code of loyalty and reckoning, but now she was at the center of it. The spark that had ignited a fire no one could ignore. The bikers edged closer, their leader's eyes never leaving Emily. "This isn't the place for mistakes," he said, his tone low, deliberate. The men at the diner shrank under his gaze, understanding they had triggered something far beyond a simple confrontation. One of the troublemakers tried to speak, to apologize, but the words caught in his throat. Emily took a deep breath, her hands clenched into fists. She knew what was coming next, even if she didn't know how it would end. The door creaked as another figure approached, footsteps slow but heavy, and the air seemed to thrum with the promise of chaos. Every diner patron held their breath, the night hanging on the edge of a knife, waiting for the storm to break. Just as the tension in the diner reached its peak, the front door slammed open again, louder this time, and a different energy rushed in. A sleek black SUV had pulled up outside, its headlights cutting through the dim glow of the street. A new figure stepped out, dressed sharply, exuding authority and danger in equal measure. The bikers froze for a split second, exchanging quick, subtle glances. Something about this stranger made even them hesitate. Emily's stomach dropped. This wasn't just a backup, it was an escalation she hadn't anticipated. The man's eyes scanned the diner, locking on Emily with a cold, calculating intensity. He didn't look like someone who belonged to her brother's world. He looked like someone who wanted to take it down. The men who had harassed her earlier suddenly realized that the chaos they had invited was now magnified. This was no longer just about a ripped jacket or a mocking insult. Ray stepped closer to Emily, whispering, "This just got bigger than any of us thought." The bikers tensed, their engines rumbling outside like beasts ready to strike. But the stranger moved with a confidence that suggested he wasn't afraid. He opened the SUV door, revealing another group of men, equally imposing, each carrying the air of someone used to getting what they want. No questions asked. Emily felt her heart pound as she realized the fight wasn't just personal anymore, it was about power, control, and reputation. The diner, once just a quiet town spot, had become the center of an impending storm, and as the stranger's gaze met hers, she knew one thing for certain. The night was about to explode, and nothing inside or outside the diner would ever be the same. The diner seemed to hold its breath as the two forces faced each other, the Hells Angels, engines idling like restless predators outside, and the sharply dressed strangers, stepping forward with quiet menace. Emily stood between them, her hands trembling slightly but her eyes fierce. She knew this was the moment everything depended on: her courage, her brother's legacy, and the unspoken code that bound her family together. The stranger finally spoke, his voice cutting through the tension. "She's not just anyone," he said, a dangerous edge in his tone, "and you know it." The bikers stiffened, but Emily felt a flicker of hope. Her brother's crew didn't just protect, they demanded respect. And now, respect had been violated, and the consequences were coming fast. Without warning, one of the men who had harassed her lunged forward, trying to escape the situation. In an instant, the bikers moved as one, surrounding him, their presence enough to freeze him mid-step. Emily's heart raced, but she stayed calm, watching as justice unfolded not through words, but through the silent, commanding authority of those who lived by loyalty and fear. The stranger stepped closer, holding up his hands in surrender, a subtle smirk appearing. All right, he said. "Maybe I misjudged her. And you?" Emily's eyes narrowed, sensing there was more beneath the surface than. Just as the tension seemed to ease, the diner's phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the charged air. Emily picked it up, and a familiar voice whispered from the other end, "You think this is over? You have no idea who's really coming next." The bikers shifted, engines growling, and the diner went silent again. Emily realized the night wasn't finished, had only just begun. The tension in the diner slowly began to ease, though the air was still thick with the aftermath of confrontation. Emily lowered the phone, her mind spinning from the warning. She realized that being the Hells Angels' sister came with both protection and responsibility. The bikers outside relaxed slightly, engines rumbling softly, as if acknowledging that the immediate danger had passed. The stranger in the sharp suit gave a small nod before retreating to his SUV, leaving behind a mixture of respect and unresolved tension.